Hi everyone, good afternoon from the UK. Welcome to the 13th Surface Ventures webinar. Before we go any further, can you please write where you're joining us from today in the chat box on the right hand side. And while you're doing that, I'll just quickly introduce myself. My name is Tahid Khan. I'm a VP at Surface Ventures and I'm your host for today. To give a bit of background about ourselves, we are a non-for-profit organisation and our mission is to provide world-class surface engineering education for academia and industry. So every month we aim to bring you a sector-leading speaker to present the current challenges and future trends in surface engineering alongside providing surface engineering workshops and live equipment demonstrations. Great. We seem to be having people from all across the globe, which is great, many great places. So today it's my pleasure to introduce and welcome back Professor Alan Matthews, who will be talking about publishing in the surface technology field. So to give a bit of background about Professor Matthews, he's a professor of surface engineering and tribology in the School of Materials and director of the EPSRC Network Plus in digitalized surface manufacturing at University of Manchester. He is a fellow of Royal Academy of Engineering. He has had a central role in many professional and learned societies, including the British Vacuum Council, the American Vacuum Society, and the Society of Vacuum Coaters. He's editor-in-chief of Elsevier Journal of Surface and Coatings Technology. So in terms of agenda, we're going to start with a presentation with Professor Matthews. Then we're going to switch for a few minutes to talk about our partner, Amber Wright, and then we'll come back to take any of your questions for Professor Matthews. We are planning to go for 60 minutes in total today. However, depending on questions, we may go over, so we do apologize if this happens. So just a quick reminder about our website, which is surfaceventures.org. It features videos from our previous talks, information regarding upcoming webinars, and information about the Surface Ventures team. So please do visit. Just before we start, as always, we'd like to know a little bit about yourselves. So there should be a quick poll coming up, and the question today is, which of these best describes your current position? Great, we've got a fair mix. Fantastic. We've got a great mix of people there. So on that note, I'd like to hand over to our speaker today, Professor Matthews. Over to yourself.
Okay, thank you. So speaking about publishing in the surface technology field, and I'm calling upon my experience as an editor-in-chief of Surface and Coatings Technology. And I have, next slide please, Sam. I have actually utilized a lot of input from Karina Rossana Kidd, who is the publisher of the Surface Science portfolio at Elsevier. And okay, at the moment I've got a Surface Ventures edition on my screen as well, but we'll carry on. So what I'm going to, next slide please, Sam. Thank you. So this is what I'm going to talk about. I'm going to give you an introduction to scholarly publishing. I'm going to talk about how to get published in a research journal and your responsibilities as an author and your rights also as an author. Next slide. So an introduction to scholarly publishing. Next one. You could say that all this began in 1439 when a guy called Gutenberg invented the movable type press, and that enabled books and other documents to be printed. The House of Elsevier, which is the forerunner of the Elsevier Company now, was founded in 1580, but they weren't a publisher. They just sold books. And the next person who had a big input on this, or an impact, is a guy called Henry Oldenburg, who was a member of the staff of the Royal Society. And he started communications with scientists and arranged some communications between scientists. And all of those then he decided they should be published. And he started to publish them and created the philosophical transactions of the Royal Society in 1665 on the 6th of March. And you see, you could say that that was the first scholarly journal. Next slide. Now the scene is absolutely huge. There are around 2,000 publishers publishing scientific, technical, and medical papers. Incredible number. The top 4 of these are listed there: Elsevier, Springer, Wiley, and Taylor and Francis. And together they publish around 35% of all the journals that are out there. There's a kind of a trade association called STM, and an organization called Wareham and May actually publish all this kind of information about the different publishers, and that's some information from them. So those 2,000 scientific, technical, and medical publishers produce around 20,000 peer-reviewed journals between them, and produce also about 1.4 million peer-reviewed articles each year. Some more information: there are around about 5.5 million researchers worldwide, and around 4 million unique authors each year. Okay, and that increases by around 3% each year. So it's an absolutely huge field. Next slide. Right, now this is some information from Elsevier. So if you start at the top and go around clockwise, they receive about 1 million submissions every year. Now 40 to 90% of articles received are rejected. I'm sure many people who get their papers rejected think they're being singled out, but they're not. My journal, for example, rejects around 70% of papers it receives. Just to put you in the picture there. So those, Elsevier has around 70,000 editorial board members, about 300,000 reviewers, and gets about 1.6 million referee reports a year. And keeping going round this clockwise, there are 350,000 new articles produced each year by Elsevier. Continuing around here, they've identified 30 million researchers in 180 countries and 4,500 institutions. And all of those download around 480 million times each year. Big business, very, very difficult to manage. 12 million articles are now available. And Elsevier identify 600,000 authors and 7,000 editors that they have on board. And even Elsevier produce 18 new journals every year. Now, one point I wanted to make was that when I started, that was quite a number of years ago, all papers used to be mailed straight to the editor. The editor then had to copy each paper, produce probably 3 or 4 copies, send them out by post to the referees. The referees would then comment on them, send them back, and then I would send them to the authors. They would then revise them, post them back, and it was very long, laborious process, very time consuming and very wasteful in time and in postage costs and paper costs, etc. Nowadays, it has to be done all online. It is all done online. It can't even be done by email. My email traffic would be huge if I was to try and do everyone by email. So it has to be done online. Please don't ever write to the editor and say, here's my paper, will you accept it? He will not thank you, or she won't thank you for it. Please use the online facility provided by the publisher. That allows us to track when it was received, when it went for review, when it came back, all of that kind of thing. Next slide, please, Sam. So the organization within the journal is that there will be a publisher. Now, I've used the word publisher to signify somebody like an organization like Elsevier, but within Elsevier, they will actually identify a publisher, a person who will be the publisher for that. And I've said already that for my journal, it's Karina, who has given me most of this information. I'm editor-in-chief, but we have other editors, and we have an editorial advisory board, which is very important. We have an aims and scope, which is also important, which you should look at before you submit a paper, make sure that your paper is within the required aims and scope. And we have quality criteria as well. Next slide. So the publisher, Karina, her responsibilities are to appoint the editors and the editorial board, provide the editorial infrastructure, so provide the peer review process, arrange the publication of accepted manuscripts, distribute and promote the journal to readers. For example, she goes to conferences and visits universities. They're also responsible for tagging and archiving of all published articles and dealing with ethical and copyright issues and providing journal information to editors and editorial board, and I guess also to the senior management at the company. They collect all kinds of useful information which you may not be aware of. You know, for example, they will look at which journals our authors are referencing and which of those other journals reference our journal. And then they will, in the top right-hand corner, they will assess these according to the impact of those different other journals. So they have a very full picture of everything that goes on around the journal, and if you like, the competitors or the similar publishers that publish the kind of papers that we publish. Next. They also have and I've only found this by preparing this talk actually, that they also accumulate information about keywords and search headings for the journal, so they can look at those keywords. They can also again look at what the impact is and the amount of citation. I guess they will do this in order to determine whether a new journal might be needed in an area, or if maybe a journal is no longer fulfilling its requirements. Okay, next one. The journal receives papers from across the globe. The size of the circles here is an indication of the numbers of papers from each of those countries. So you can see, in fact, if you go to the next slide, you can see here that China is dominant in terms of the numbers of papers submitted. More than 5 or even 6 times any other country. Very, very interesting. Of course, China is very large, a large number of scientists, so it's not surprising that it's high. But then again, there are also some other surprising numbers there. For example, Taiwan, with a population of I think about half that of the UK, is submitting more papers than the USA. And I think this is all an indication of the level of scientific activity in these different countries. Okay, thank you. So the next person who has responsibilities is an editor. So I'm responsible for helping to define the aims and scope, handling new submissions, sending out appropriate papers to reviewers, accepting or rejecting papers, communicating with authors and reviewers, and advising on strategy and direction of the journal. And I do that together with the other editors who are listed here. We have editors from around the world, from France, America, Hong Kong, Australia, Switzerland, America and Sweden in Ivan's case, and Greece and Cyprus in Klaus's case, and India in the case of Professor Shibley. And we also have a managing editor. Dave Matthews is over in Holland, is an academic in Holland. He acts as the first filter. So he will check that papers are within scope and that the language, etc., is to a satisfactory level, at least as a first filter, so that the editors don't get deluged with quite as many papers as they would otherwise. Okay, next one. Yeah, so the editorial board is an important part of the system. We have about 50, I think, editorial board members, and they're appointed by the publisher and the editors. They're experts in a subfield of the journal, and they can be consulted when needed. And we meet them at least once a year. Used to meet them at San Diego when we could meet them at San Diego, but maybe again we'll be able to do that again. So they advise on topics of special issues and review papers, advise on the strategy and future direction of the journal, and they, in a sense, represent the authors and readers of the journal. So if you've got a point to make, by all means, contact an editorial board member. That's all on the journal website. Another important part of the journal is the aims and scope. You should always look at the aims and scope of any journal you're thinking of submitting to, because it will define the subject matter that it's interested in, the audience of that particular journal, the type of readership they're aiming at, the types of articles they publish, the quality or coverage of the field, and whether they're associated with other groups. For example, we have a sister journal, Thin Solid Films, and they publish more functional coatings. So this is a typical page from our website setting up aims and scope. I'm going to come back to that so we can move on to the next one. Another important number, depending on who you believe. Some people think this is not important and it's an erroneous measure, but still we use it, and that is the impact factor. And all journals like to have a high and increasing impact factor. When I joined Surface and Coatings Technology many years ago, I think the impact factor was something like 0.2 or something, and it's risen steadily, and it's about 4.158 now. Now, how do you find that out? Well, that's how is it calculated? Well, it's in that particular case, it's calculated by the number of citations in 2020 to any content from the journal published in 2018 and 2019, divided by the total number of scholarly citable items published in 2018 and 2019. And that's basically any item index within the Web of Science, an article, review, or proceeding paper is the denominator. The numerator is the current number of citations. And that's how you get the impact factor. And very important to, I think, to use a journal with a high impact factor, because it generally indicates that the reviewing standard and the overall standard of the journal is very high. And your paper will be seen and will be cited. Okay, so what you need to do to get published, you need to define what type of manuscript you've got. These are typical questions we get asked. What steps do I need to take? What What's the type of manuscript? How can I assure I'm using the proper manuscript language? How do I build my article properly? What's the process and what's the article construction? All of that information is online. But when you write your paper, you've got to remember, in your mindset, you've got three main groups of readers. You've got the actual readers who read the journal, but you've also got the reviewer and you've got the editor. So have these three people in mind when you write your paper. Okay. Are you ready to publish? Well, that depends if you have you've made a significant enhancement to published work. If you're doing a review, make sure it's an up-to-date review of the subject or in the right field. If the work is outdated, if it duplicates published work, if it has incorrect conclusions, then the balance is against you publishing. Obviously, your paper is going to get rejected. So just weigh that up before you submit your paper. Is the paper strong enough in that sense? Does it provide that significant enhancement? A strong manuscript should have a clear, useful, and exciting message. Present and construct it in a logical manner, and make sure that the reviewers and the editors can grasp the significance easily. So these editors and reviewers are all busy people trying to make things easy for them to save their time. So a strong manuscript should have originality, should have significant advances in the field, should have a clear context and relationship to previous work, should have appropriate methods and conclusions, should be readable, and should meet ethical standards. And I'm going to touch on each of these as I carry on talking to you. So what's the most appropriate type of manuscript for you? Is it going to be a conference paper that's going to go in a conference proceedings? Some conference proceedings are published in journals, even better. That way you get a full journal paper as well as your conference paper. You can either have a full original article, or a short communication or a letter, or you might have a review paper or a perspective. And to be honest, different journals concentrate more in each of these areas. So I would say that Surface and Coatings Technology is primarily a paper dedicated to full-length research papers, original research papers. We don't publish very many reviews. I'll try and explain that to you. There are also journals that concentrate on short communications and letters. You know what those are. Those are good. Often they don't have subheadings. If you want to get something published quickly, usually that's the best way to go. And in regarding review papers, we only publish reviews by invitation. Our approach for review papers is that we will publish one if there's been a significant development in a particular field and it merits a review. Then we will actually approach the prime innovator in that field. I can tell you that I get many people writing to me saying, my student's written a superb literature review for their thesis. Can they publish it? Well, I'm sorry, the answer is no. Because what we're looking for is just the prime innovators to be submitting reviews in their field. Other journals deal with publishing review papers. Okay, next one. The language should be clear, objective, accurate, and brief. Should have brevity, with good sentence construction and overall presentation. Avoid incorrect tenses, avoid mixing language. Read the guide for authors, aims and scope of the journal for any advice on language, etc. Next one. So this is coming back again to that aims and scope page. And read it and understand what it means. So in the green type, so the top bit basically tells you the topic areas that we receive papers in. The green part tells you articles must go beyond the technical recipe format and gain new understanding and insight based on detailed characterization of coatings and processes. Experimental papers should provide complete information on the process parameters, and an appropriate microstructural characterization, and maybe further analyses usually will be required as well, maybe XRD or other analytical information. And ideally, papers should report on the synthesis, characterization, properties, performance, relationships. Okay. Should be written in good English, contain a balance of up-to-date reference list, formatted according to the Guide to Authors. You are also asked to provide a cover letter, which should clearly explain the novelty and originality of the research and its scientific contribution beyond previously published papers. If you don't do that, the submission won't be considered for publication and won't be sent out for review. I'm sorry if all this sounds very harsh, but we have to be harsh because some people still don't follow these basic rules, if you like, of publishing. Okay, so the process, the next page. So when you write your paper, what you should do, and this again isn't prescriptive, this is just if you like, Elsevier's advice or my advice, as you collect the elements of the paper, prepare a first draft, and then rewrite and improve. Next slide. Prepare an outline for writing the first draft. Determine the central message, the research questions. Prepare draft versions of the plots, figures, tables, and images. Summarize your findings in a logical way and select the appropriate references. Okay, next one. So what this is basically saying, and I'm not entirely sure I completely agree with this, but what this advice from Elsevier is that you should write your first draft in your own style, quickly and without editing, and be less concerned about language quality at this stage, which is fair enough. If you want to get the message down, don't be so worried about language. But I personally would like, if a student is drafting a paper, to take some care, even for the first draft, over the language quality. Then read your first draft and add notes to it. Read it not as the author, but as a critical reader. What would the reader like to find out from your paper? What is the main message? Is it clear to a new reader? Next one. Then you will probably have to revise the text. We might have missed a couple of slides. Keep going. Next one. Okay. So the general structure of the article would be, well, you would have these elements in it. All papers have these elements. The title, the abstract and keywords, an introduction, methods section, results, and a discussion section. We'll also have conclusions, acknowledgements, references, and supporting material. Now, the next slide, this is a suggestion from somebody else here, and the order in which you should put your paper together. Again, it's a matter for personal opinion here. They're suggesting you get your figures and tables, get your method, your results, and your discussion, then write the conclusions and the introduction, and then finally the title and abstract. Now, there's a certain logic in this that it is certainly better to write the conclusions when you've assembled the paper, and they're saying it's better to also write the introduction at that point, and then giving the background, and then also at that point to determine the title and abstract. Okay. Tables and figures are important, as they say. A picture is worth 1,000 words, and make appropriate use of illustrations, so they convey the results, which are the driving force of the publication. The captions and legends must be detailed enough to make the figures and tables self-explanatory. So if somebody goes to your paper, sees a figure they're interested in, then the caption or the legend should explain properly what's in that figure. Okay. Try to avoid duplication of results that are actually described in the illustration. Okay. So the method section, methodology or whatever, or experimental work or experimental section, whatever you want to call it, should describe how the problem was studied, include detailed information. This is saying do not describe previously published procedures. And again, I don't fully agree with that. I don't really want to read a paper and then say, you know, we did this as described in reference 3. I'd rather have a little bit of information of the procedure, then I don't need to be going off finding another paper. So don't completely repeat the procedure if you have already explained it, but I think you are allowed, without being accused of plagiarism, of re-describing some key parts of your procedure, which you might well have described previously. You must identify the equipment and describe materials that you've used. Okay. The results section must be clear and easy to understand, must highlight the main findings, feature unexpected findings, provide a statistical analysis. You should show the scatter in your data in graphs, and should include illustrations and figures, as I've said, of the results. The discussion section, you could argue it's the most important section. It's the part where you bring together what you've done and you make sense of what you've done, and you set it in the context of other work. It's important to say how your results relate to what other people have written, and if it doesn't agree, explain why, or maybe suggest reasons why there might be a difference. And then you'll come to the conclusions, and the conclusions should be clear, provide justification for the work, should provide information on how they advance the present state of knowledge. And it's always good if you can provide suggestions for future work and future experiments. Okay. Then we come back in that way that was presented to write the introduction. So that should provide a brief context to readers. I must admit, normally I would expect you to write the introduction first, but they are suggesting you should wait till you've completed the rest of it and then write it. How you're going to address the problem, how you identify solutions and limitation, what it is that you're hoping to achieve from the research that you're reporting, and they should be consistent with the nature of the journal. So it's always useful, you know, as well as reading the scope and aims, it's also useful to look at other papers in that journal. Okay, then you come to the title. The title should be the fewest possible words, but still adequately describe the content. It should identify the main issue that you're addressing in the paper, and shouldn't use rarely used abbreviations. In fact, some would argue you shouldn't use abbreviations at all in the title. Make it clear what is in the paper. Okay, the next thing that's important is the abstract, and the abstract is basically an you could argue it's an advertisement of your article, your paper. Should make it interesting and understandable, make it accurate and specific. It's not an introduction. It should include keywords, and the a clear abstract will strongly influence whether or not your work is considered, by the way. Keep it as brief as possible. It has to, the key thing here is that you must include your main results. So that second point, the abstract is not a introduction. You must mention your key results in the abstract. Okay, so in this next thing, kind of illustrates that the abstract includes what you've done, but it's absolutely vital that you include what your main findings are. It's pointless saying this paper is about depositing, I don't know, HVOF coatings, and we studied them by XRD, pin on disc, blah, 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 but not saying what your findings were. That is not an abstract. The abstract has got to say what the findings are. Okay. You should have acknowledgements. The acknowledgements, I always think the main acknowledgement is to the funder. That's the second one there. You should also acknowledge any additional advisors that aren't authors, anybody that's proofread or help you with it in that way. I mean, I don't think I've ever seen anybody in many years acknowledge a typist, but I guess they used to do. And you might also acknowledge suppliers who may have donated materials. Funders nowadays require you to acknowledge their input in the acknowledgement, and so that's a strongly advised thing to do, is to acknowledge your funders. Keywords, again, these are used by indexing and abstracting services, and they are basically labels of your manuscript. Again, don't use abbreviations unless they're very, very common ones like DNA. You could use that as a keyword, but only if it's a well-known abbreviation. Check the guide for authors for advice on keywords. Very often there's further advice on the journal's webpage on keywords. References, I would say do not use too many references. Always ensure you have a fully absorbed material that you're referencing. Don't just reference something because that's the reference everybody else uses. Make sure it's an appropriate reference. Avoid excessive self-citations. I'm afraid that too many people use the references to try to boost their own citations. Publishers are very wise to that. Avoid excessive citations of publications from the same region, because it indicates maybe that you're not properly aware of the wider landscape. Strictly conform strictly to the style given in the guide for authors. Different journals have different ways of formatting references. Best to refer to fully peer-reviewed papers published in international journals as much as possible. I personally don't like references to web pages because they go out of date. I know people do it. If you have to do it, always put the date when you accessed the web page. Now, can just come back to this about not too many references. The only exception to that, I would say, would be a review paper. And a review paper should have a lot of references. You know, most good review papers might have 100, 200, or even more references. Now, that's a paper that's meant to be a definitive snapshot of the whole area. So quite likely that you will have a lot of references. And if you are an appropriate review paper writer, in other words, somebody who's contributed to the innovation, I would expect there to be a lot of papers from the writer of that review paper. Okay, so that's the exception to that. Okay, next one. The next one is the cover letter. That's your chance to speak to the editor directly. You submit it along with your manuscript. Mention what would make your manuscript special to the journal. No special requirements. You are allowed to say if there are particular reviewers that you would prefer your paper not to go to. You should also mention conflicts of interest. So the letter should also include the fact that you've got final approval from all authors. Nowadays, most publishers will write to all authors to make sure that they're aware of the submission and that they agree to it. And you are allowed also to, most publishers will allow you to suggest reviewers. Please don't suggest reviewers from your own organization or suggest reviewers who you've published with or that you closely interact with. We are very, very wise to all of that. And we will not use recommended reviewers very often because of that kind of activity. Okay. Check the manuscript as thoroughly as you possibly can. Ask a colleague or supervisor to review the manuscript. Submit the manuscript with a cover letter and await the response. Generally, the editor will then do a first check on language. That could be the managing editor who will do that for them. And they are allowed to desk reject. After an initial review, they'll send it out initial check, they'll send it out for review. usually to a few referees. Nowadays, very often we've got to send it to many referees because very often people don't respond. It can take many weeks depending on how quickly the reviewers are. Many invited reviewers decline the invitation, so that adds to the review times. Worse still, some people accept to review a paper and with no intention of reviewing it, and that is the most frustrating thing that editors have to deal with when they're trying to give a fast response on a paper. Please don't agree to review a paper if you've no intention of ever doing it. I could tell you one or two people around the globe who do that. The editor receives referee reports and takes a decision based on them. In case of doubt, they may consult another referee or may review it themselves. And then the editor will inform the author. Okay, then you will get a decision, accept or reject. Accept, very, very rarely do you get an accept as is. We used to, but very rarely does it happen now. Normally you will have a revision requirement, either minor or major. If you get rejected, don't despair. You are in the majority, I would say. The majority of authors get rejected. You are allowed to submit the work to another journal, but my advice would be not to submit the same paper. Take on board what the reviewers have said and try to take notice of that and try to improve the paper before you submit it anywhere else. Very often the paper will go out to the same reviewers, and you wouldn't believe the number of times that I get told, look, I had to review this paper for XYZ journal and I still reject it. So try to take account. Don't just resubmit a rejected paper. There's obviously something wrong with it. Okay, next one. Main reason might be that it's out of scope, that it's got poor language, that it lacks novelty, that it lacks a thorough analysis, or that it's just generally poor science. So you're likely to get an either major revision or minor revision. Carefully consider those and adjust the manuscript and prepare a detailed letter response. Respond to all points. If you disagree with the reviewer, you're quite at liberty to disagree as long as you provide a strong scientific rebuttal, but don't ignore the comment. State exactly what changes you've made to address the reviewer's comments, mentioning the pages where they've been made, and highlight in colour those changes so that the reviewer who may get it back to check can see what changes you've made. You may perform minor additional experiments, calculations or computations, where those are requested by the reviewer. The thing is, if substantial revisions are required with more experimentation, then that really requires a new paper. That's because the receive date then becomes redundant, and if the experiments and the results have changed. So in that case, you're going to have to submit it as a new paper. So how to get accepted? Choose the right journal, follow the guide for authors, use the correct language, clearly present the purpose and relevance of the research, presents the results clearly and logically, include a thorough analysis of results and discuss them, link your own research to other research, ensure the conclusions are in line with the results, have a balanced and up-to-date references list, and obey publishing ethics. And publishing ethics comes into your responsibilities. So your responsibilities are to ensure, next slide, originality. Ensure there are no conflicts of interest. Ensure that the authorship is appropriate. You are responsible for submission, and you're responsible for the consequences of submission. Okay. Originality, I'll ask you this question. A researcher notices a paragraph in a previously published paper or article that would be very suitable as the conclusion for his article. The researcher decides to copy that paragraph into his paper or her paper without quotes or attribution. Has that researcher violated any ethical boundaries? Now, if we add the point, I'd ask you to put your hand up if you think he has or he hasn't. Well, he has, obviously. In almost all cases, this is plagiarism. Research work should represent original and meaningful work that is objectively researched and accurately reflected in the well-written paper and report. What are examples of a lack of originality? Fabrication, making up research data, absolutely forbidden. Falsification, manipulation of existing research data, absolutely forbidden. Plagiarism, passing off your work from somebody else's as your own work, or copying or paraphrasing substantial parts of another paper's paper without attribution, to claiming the results of research conducted by others. These are ethical misconduct and very, very serious. Now, I do sound serious here, but I am serious because I know of academics being fired from their jobs because of plagiarism was found out in their papers. I even know of an academic in another university overseas, a vice chancellor who lost their job because evidence of plagiarism came to light from early in their career, from 20 years previously. So you will be found out. You know, these papers are online and people can check. And if we get a complaint of this, then it goes to the top. It will go to the top of the institution of the author who has plagiarized other work. So please don't try to get away with any of these. You will be found out at some time, and it can have dire career consequences. Sometimes papers have to retract it, and then the whole world knows. Next slide. So here's a paper that got retracted because somebody complained, and then you get the following page stamped all over the paper. Next one, please, Sam. You get retracted, stamped all over the paper, and then everybody will know, and the reason why it was retracted will be revealed. Okay, not something you want on your record. Plagiarism detection really came to the fore in 2009 when a number of publishers got together and instigated something called cross-check. And they looked at 26.6 million articles from 49,000 journals from 124 publishers, and they used Authenticate software to show similarities. And the fallout from that is still continuing to some extent. That was actually instigated by 400 editors in 2009, and now in the next slide, now they, as well as using Authenticate, they also use Turnitin. So every paper, every manuscript is automatically checked against a database of 30 million peer-reviewed articles, which are provided by over 200 publishers, including Elsevier. And the software shows similarities. Next one. So we'll get a report of common paragraphs, common sentences. Normally it doesn't look like this. It normally looks like selected sentences which are taken from other publications. And we have our own thresholds of levels of plagiarism. And within this, of course, we include self-plagiarism, which is still plagiarism. It may seem unfair, but if you're not careful, your earlier paper is not your copyright, it's the copyright of the publisher. So again, if you're going to use something from earlier, you should get permission to use it, particularly figures. And I would say that the mechanisms that are going on now on this are very thorough. So next slide. The message is plagiarism is serious, no copying. It's a serious offence viewed by your institute, by journal editors and the scientific community. It may result in academic charges against you. It will certainly cause rejection of the paper. It will hurt your reputation in the scientific community. Okay, last couple of slides now. I've mentioned peer review. I'm sure you all know what peer review is, but it's the evaluation of work by one or more people of similar competence to the producers of the work. So the evaluation is by your own peers. So it's used to assess the quality, significance, and originality of scientific research before publication. It provides credibility for you and for the journal, improves the record of the science, controls the scientific communication, ensures that previous work is properly acknowledged. Next one. It isn't a black hole peer review. It goes in. Normally I'd follow this round, but the paper comes in. If it doesn't meet the basic requirements, it gets rejected. The reviewers are assigned, comes back from reviewers. Is it reject? Goes back to reject. If not, it is either an abstract, an accept, or a revision, in which case it will go down around the loop again until it gets accepted or finally rejected. Okay, thank you. That's all I wanted to say. These are some sources of further information. And if you think I'm being a bit over serious about plagiarism, I can tell you that it is a serious matter, and you must not. You must avoid it. But generally, I would try to be a bit more upbeat about publishing. It's an exciting thing to do. It certainly gives you credibility, and which is what you need for your career, to develop your career. And certainly reading other papers in your field is the right thing to do in order to progress. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Professor Matthews. I really appreciate that. So at this point, I'd like to go to our sponsor. We'll be having a quick presentation, quick description about Amberite. So at this point, I'll hand over to Sam.
Everyone, so I will be giving a quick overview of Amberite as the sponsor for this webinar today, and this will be an overview of the academic writing and publishing support that Amberite can offer. This is in the form of online training. So Amberite, since 2012, have helped academic authors improve the quality, scientific content, and publishing prospects of their research papers. And this is in the form of the delivery of academic writing workshops and webinars for universities across the world. And why choose Amberite? Because they're actively involved in academic publishing as journal editors, members of journal boards, and reviewers with extensive experience in publishing the results of their own research, and they know the publishing process well. So this training is provided as a series of webinars to help explain to you the process of academic publishing, to convince you that though, this is it's a serious and a lot of work, it is an exciting experience. So there are 4 live webinars, and they focus on, first of all, the introduction of modern academic writing. Second, efficiency in the paper writing process. The third webinar focuses on paper submission and how to reply to comments. And finally, webinar number 4, maximizing the impact of the published paper. The content of each of these, for the first one, this will be talking about the literature review and how to work with co-authors, how to choose the right publication format and journal, recognizing and avoiding predatory publishers, explaining open access models, and a little more detail on measuring impact, the impact factor, and H-index. The second webinar on efficient paper writing process, how to use an IMRAD manuscript structure, rules for good manuscript titles and an informative abstract, writing comprehensive introduction and discussion, writing effective paragraphs in English, how to construct your arguments and descriptions of the area well, and providing further information on plagiarism and copyright rules in academic publishing. The third webinar on paper submission and replying to comments, how to select the right journal, preparing manuscripts for peer review, writing a cover letter and suggesting reviewers, a little more information on desk redaction and effective paper revision and how to reply to comments. And then webinar number 4, finally, maximizing the impact. So supporting the paper lifecycle after publication, ways to promote your published paper and increase your citations, becoming the key person of influence in the field, like how to go about this, increasing impact with apps and services for researchers. In addition to publishing, we must promote our research. There's no good simply publishing and then letting your paper go. You should take an active part in promoting your work. And then finally, what's next? Becoming a journal reviewer and board member. So more than 1,000 academics have participated in these training courses, with 94% of the training participants confirming that they use the knowledge from this training in practice. And 92% of participants would recommend this training to their friends. If you would like to find out a little more about Amber-Write, you can visit Amber-Write website, www.amberwrite.com. You can also email thomas@amberwrite.com, present on screen now. And the website link is also present as a featured action. So thank you all. And now we'll go to the question and answer section.
Thank you very much, Sam. And we'll begin to take some questions. Right. Can you please suggest a few journals for publishing review papers in the field of surface science and tribology, etc.? Sorry, your mic's muted.
Yeah, my suggestion is to go to a reviews journal, which is, it may be, I mean, we do occasionally publish by invitation, but we regard ourselves as primarily as an original research, full-length research paper journal. Some other journals are more open to taking review papers, and I can't really personally recommend, because this actually comes to the previous question. I think there are too many review papers being written, if I'm honest with you, and you're far better submitting a good solid research paper. The previous question says, can you explain what 4-star and 3-star quality journals are? I think what you mean, what are 4-star and 3-star quality papers. The 3-star and 4-star relates to the research excellence framework exercise, which is rating papers, 1-star, 2-star, 3-star, 4-star. And of course, the 4-star has got to be internationally leading. Those definitions are fully available on the REE or on the REF websites. And does this have a connection to the impact factor? Well, officially, no. The people who are on the REF panels are told not to look at impact factors of journals, but I suspect that they probably can't avoid it. So, how can we say? well, what I can say is that review papers have no value whatsoever in the ref experience, in the ref exercise. And that tells you something about what I'm saying about review papers. They're easy to write, and people churn them out, and they get their H indexes increased by writing lots of review papers. But personally, I think that what we should concentrate on is original research papers. But by all means, if you've got a tribology paper, drop a note to them online. Don't, preferably not to the editor directly as an email, but to the journal, to the online source, and make that offer. And I don't know if I've answered those questions. There was another point there about what there is. So rather than 3-star, 4-star journals, there is Q1, Q2, Q3, etc. And that's something else. So all of these quality journals are Q1, and that's defined by a set of other criteria in relation to the quality of the papers that get published. So you can, if you look in a website called Scimago, SCIMAGO, they have this kind of information about every one of these journals in terms of if they're Q1, Q2, Q3, etc., and explain how they arrive at that decision. And then the other excellent website is the Clarivate one, which is the one which will give the impact factor of all the journals, and explain how it devises that impact factor. So 3-star, 4-star, 5-star, etc. is something which tends to be used by the research excellent framework and the research assessment exercise, and that is well defined how they categorize a paper. But they do not class any review paper above 1 star, and that's if you're lucky.
Perfect.
Sorry if that's bad news, because I know that a lot of people write some good review papers, and it enhances their H index. But from the point of view of quality and contribution of research, it isn't really contributing so much.
Okay. I think we'll move on to the next question, which is, how long normally does it take to get published in Surface and Coatings Technology Journal?
Well, that's a very good question, and that data is available, and we give average. Well, for one thing, you can see it because on every paper we publish, we show the received date, accepted date, publication date. We are at the moment trying to get reviews back from reviewers in 3 to 4 weeks, but or less, I would say. However, we are entirely dependent on the reviewers. Once we receive it and then we get it, then it has to go back to the author. There's another delay, so you can't generalize. But we are competitive with every other journal now, including some well-known journals who are advertising very rapid turnover.
Perfect, thank you. Next question.
And Sam has kindly put up the websites for Scimago and for Clarivate. Very, very useful. You learn an awful lot by going to those sites about these rankings and all that kind of thing.
Great, they are very helpful, thank you. Can you please describe how best one can improve the exposure and with it probability of getting cited once published?
Do good work. Write a paper that is novel and has new results, properly argues the relationship with other work in the field, and makes a real contribution. Don't just we have some people just salami slice information, and then they will just put out incremental papers. That's not going to get you well cited. Try to produce a paper that is has a really good impact in the field.
That's great. Regarding the rejected papers, what is the most common mistake made by authors submitting to your journal?
Well, there are many, many, many. One is language. One is not putting the work in the context of previous work. Sometimes republishing their own work again with very slight variations. You know, the whole gamut of possible reasons for rejection. So is that Thomas?
Yeah.
It's difficult to answer, Thomas. I can't say, you know, well, the most common mistake, but that gets filtered out at the early stage, would be inadequate language, very often inadequate referencing, not referencing work that's already out there. All that kind of thing. Anyway, Thomas writes good papers, so he doesn't need to be asking that.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. I think that's all the questions for today. So thank you everyone for the questions. Professor Matthews, thank you for this really engaging talk. I think it was very necessary.
Yeah. What I'm going to do about this question about review papers is I'm going to approach Karina and say what her advice is, because some journals are less picky than others about doing review papers. So I'll see if I mean, they did start another journal called Surfaces and Interfaces, which was meant to be more open to that kind of thing, but in fact it's grown by publishing original papers.
Sure. That's perfect. Thank you. We appreciate that. So what I'd like to do is take a minute to thank Professor Matthews for this really engaging talk. Thank you for sharing. Thank you to Amberite for being our partner in supporting this webinar. A reminder, please do visit our website. Previous talks and this talks will be available to watch again. And moving on to our next webinar, due to the summer break, we will aim to organize our next webinar for September. So please do stay tuned and keep an eye on the website. We will provide more details in the coming weeks. We will be also having a fourth workshop, which is hosted by one of our team members, Dr. Sam McMaster, and it's on our tribology and surface engineering surface. And the fourth workshop will be focusing on fretting and extreme pressure, and that will be hosted on the 16th of September at 9 a.m., sponsored by Optimal Instruments. So please do join us for that. We also, as always, we ask for your support to take the time to advertise these lectures to your contacts, and we hope they make a big impact to them as they do to yourselves and ourselves too. So on that note, once again, thank you very much, Professor Matthews. Everyone, we hope to see you again. For now, enjoy the rest of your day, and we see you soon. Thank you, everyone.
Howard, can I say that Thomas has put in a very good reason why papers get rejected, that people just write them as a technical report rather than a proper scientific paper. And it's a very good point.
And that's in the comments box.
That's in the comments, yeah.
Sure. Thank you very much, and thank you, everyone. Have a good day.
Thank you.
Bye. Bye.